Hello, my name is Brittany Russ, and I want to welcome you to this video devotional. The passage that God has put on my heart to share with you is a passage that leapt off the pages for me as I was reading it a few weeks ago in the book of Mark, and I want to share it with you. It's about a woman with an issue of bleeding. It's a very significant story that's very significant for our own lives as well. It's in Mark chapter 5, and I want to read a couple verses to you, and we're going to break this down and see what we can learn from it. Starting in verse 25. Now a woman suffering from bleeding for 12 years had endured much under many doctors. And I want to stop right there before we go any further. This woman, it says that she was suffering from bleeding for 12 years ago. It's not just bleeding, it's bleeding. Like, she was bleeding non-stop for 12 years. And that has so many implications. Physically, doctors believe it would have made her anemic and weak, having lost all that blood. It would have made normal daily activities impossible. She was likely stuck in her home a lot, bedridden, just stuck in one place because she could not stop bleeding. But more than the physical implications are the spiritual and just the emotional implications of that. Leviticus chapter 15 talks about people with an issue of bleeding. They were considered unclean. So for 12 years, this woman was considered unclean. She wouldn't have been allowed in the temple. She wouldn't have been allowed to attend worship services. So there goes a huge aspect of a spiritual life and community. It also would have meant that anyone who touched her or anything that touched her would have been considered unclean. So if she was married, we don't know if she had a family, but if she was married, if she had children, she would not have been allowed to touch her family because they would have been considered unclean. It's likely that if she was married, a husband would have divorced her because of the circumstances. I don't know about you, but can you imagine going 12 years without physical touch? Without feeling another human being hugging you or grabbing your hand? If you had children, not being able to hold your children. I mean, you think about just the isolation and the loneliness that this woman felt for 12 years, where she couldn't go anywhere, she couldn't touch anyone, people likely isolated themselves from her. It was truly so sad to think about what this woman endured for 12 years. And it says, continuing in verse 26, that she had endured many doctors. She had spent everything she had and was not helped at all. On the contrary, she became worse. And so this woman for 12 years has seen all the doctors. She's gone to all the physicians. She's gone to all the people, and she's literally spent everything that she has, all her money. Everything has been spent on doctors, and not a single person can help her. In fact, it says, on the contrary, she became worse. And so here's this woman. She has no community. She likely is living in isolation, and she's literally spent everything she had seeking answers for this healing, and nothing has helped her. Nothing has helped her. And so when she hears about Jesus coming to her town, she thinks this is her chance. This is her moment. In verse 27, having heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his clothing. For she said, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be made well. Instantly, her flow of blood ceased, and she sensed in her body that she was healed of her affliction. It's likely that she waited for an opportunity where there was a large crowd where she could maybe sneak in unseen to experience an encounter with Jesus. You know, if it had been in a smaller encounter or maybe public, that would have been a very shameful experience for her. So she thinks, I'll hide myself in the crowd. I'm just going to simply touch his garment. She had the faith to believe that if she simply touched his garments, that she could be healed. She had incredible faith, but she's also very lonely. There's a lot of shame, connected to this sort of disorder. And so she thinks, maybe if I just hide in the crowd, nobody will notice me. It won't be a big deal. I won't be called out, and I can just get my healing and I can leave. But as we know, Jesus we cannot steal miracles from Jesus. Like, he knows all things. And it says, he senses that some power has gone out from him. And he's asking, who touched my clothes? He's stopping. And just for context, he's just been asked to go heal a very important person in the town. His daughter is dying. His 12-year-old daughter is dying, and he's been asked to go to her to heal her. And so he's on his way, and he stops. He stops because he knows power has gone out from it. And he's not saying this because he wants to call someone out for doing something wrong. On the contrary, he is excited by the fact that his power has gone out to heal someone. And he wants to know, who have I healed? And he knows, but he's making he's calling this out for a very specific reason. And she knows she can't hide. And so what she does is she says, I'm the one. She comes with fear and trembling, knowing what had happened to her. She came and fell before him and told him the whole truth. And he said, daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be healed from your affliction. Jesus is acknowledging her faith here. Nobody knew that anything had happened except for Jesus and this woman. He could have kept walking through the crowd. He could have kept going in the direction of that 12-year-old girl, but he stopped. He stopped because he wanted to call out and bring attention to this woman's faith. And it's this incredible story of this woman experiencing healing. She had gone to all the people. She had sought answers in the world and could not find the answer to what she was looking for until she came in faith to Jesus and he healed her. He was the only one who could bring the healing and to make her whole again. And when I was reading this, I was so challenged by her faith, which was so beautiful and so incredible. But I'm more so challenged by perhaps her faith journey up until that point, where she really wrestled with faith, right? And she was turning to the world for all the answers. And let me say this, there's nothing wrong with going to doctors. I was just at the doctor last week. There's nothing wrong with it. And God uses medical professionals, and we're so grateful for them. But what this is illustrating is in a more generic sense of we are looking in the world for our answers, right? You get some bad news, and perhaps the first thing that you want to do is you want to call up your best friend or call up your mom or your significant other instead of going to Jesus first and talking about it with them. Or, perhaps you've hit rock bottom and you have nowhere else to turn. And so you finally turn to Jesus at that rock bottom instead of going to him in the first place and turning that situation over to him and asking for his insight and his guidance. Too often we're turning to the people in our lives, or we're turning to, perhaps it's a substance or it's an addiction like food or drinking, whatever that might be. We're looking for things in this world to satisfy the emptiness or the desires that we seek that can't be found in this world. Wholeness is only in Jesus, but too often we're looking for answers in the world like this woman, and we're coming up short. We're coming up empty, and in contrast, it's actually becoming worse. The things of this world will actually, if we try to fulfill our needs and find our answers in the world, they're just going to make it worse. Just like this woman who gave everything to seek an answer, right? And she only got worse. And I look at this passage and I'm challenged. And I want to challenge you today. Are you looking to other people or to other things in this world to satisfy you, to fulfill you when you're in trouble, to find an answer? It should not be the first place you turn to. Another person should not be the first place you turn to. Substances, food, things in this world should not be the first thing that you turn to. It should be Jesus. And it was only when she finally, had this faith where she's like, I'm going to trust Jesus can heal me, did she find healing? And it's the same in our lives. God will use people, and God will use like doctors and situations to help us. But the answer is in Jesus. He is the only provider of good gifts. The Bible says that he's a giver of good gifts, and every good thing that we have is from above. And so I just want to challenge you today to go to Jesus. Don't wait till the last minute. Don't wait till you're at rock bottom. Don't wait until you've talked about it through with all your closest, friends. Don't wait until you realize that alcohol isn't fulfilling what that emptiness might feel like inside of you. Go to Jesus. Be like the woman, learn from the woman instead of seeking it out in the world. That was an example that she gave of what not to do, right? What she did, going to doctors, again, not a bad thing, but when we seek our answers in the world, we're going to come up empty, and oftentimes we're going to come up worse. But maybe learn from her faith that if she simply touched the garment of Jesus, she would be healed. And Jesus acknowledged her faith. He stopped, and he acknowledged her faith in a crowd of people to show people, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I want in a person, is someone who will come to me in faith, believing that I can make their situation better. I have the answer. I can bring healing, restoration, provision. Jesus has all of that in him. And all he is asking is that we would simply come to him in faith, believing. Just simply what that means is believing that Jesus will do what he says that he will do in his word, that he can do what his promises say that he can do, and trusting him to do that in your life. And so go to Mark 5 if you're looking for just some insight to learning more about this faith. And maybe if you're struggling with, you're really looking for answers in the world, turn to this passage. Study it. Let God speak to your life, speak to your heart through this passage. And my prayer is that, as you go forth today, tomorrow, and in the days to come, that Jesus will be the first place you turn to in any and every situation. Amen. Thank you for joining me today.